Uh, Welcome everyone to our last day of debate for the 35th year of Youth Parliament online. We've got a really exciting day up ahead of us. This morning we have Moyne and the Deaf Hood team in a great debate. In the council, I'm really excited for today, but now I'm going to pass over to Beck Brooker just to introduce herself, share a bit about yourself, and then kick off the debate when you're ready.
Hi everyone, my name is Beck Brooker. I use she, her pronouns. I have been involved in the world of Youth Parliament for a very long time now. I was a participant way back in 2009, which makes me feel a little bit old, but that's okay. And have been on the task force for many years after that, as well as program directing. I also work in the youth empowerment space in a bunch of, well, I have in the past in a bunch of different organizations, currently in youth mental health. But today I'm really excited to hear about the bill being presented by Moyne Shire. I used to work a lot in regional Victoria as well, so I'm super excited to hear what you've come up with for your bill today. So on that, I call upon the sponsor of the bill.
President, the Honourable Member Killett. I move to introduce a bill titled Sustainable Agriculture Incentives Bill.
The question is that the bill now be read a first time. All those of that opinion say aye. To the contrary, no. They're trickling in. I think the ayes have it. So happy to move on to the second reading.
President, the Honourable Member Killett. I move that the bill now be read a second time. With the matter of public importance on net zero emissions on Monday, highlighting how passionate many of us are about ensuring sustainability for our future as young people, I would like to touch upon an issue that many of you may not have considered in great depth, that being sustainability specifically within the agricultural sector. Agriculture is a significant contributor to climate change and environmental degradation, with the 2019 UN climate report showing that land use associated with agriculture makes up 22% of all global greenhouse gas emissions, and 29% when transport and processing are considered as well. Therefore, targeting farms and agricultural communities has been a crucial part of many legislative efforts across the world, including here in Victoria, through recent changes in the Environmental Protection Act and Environmental Protection Agency. However, as young people, our team want to show our passion for this subtopic and have drafted together a proposal that emphasizes innovation and community collaboration and is known as the Sustainable Agriculture Incentives Bill. Our bill is intended to go beyond simply addressing climate change from a broad perspective and aims to specifically target the agricultural industry and the farmers that work within it, of many different sizes. Having come from a local region, our entire team felt that it was important to ensure that farmers are given opportunities to implement sustainable practices in a flexible and innovative approach. To summarize, the bill seeks to achieve these purposes through establishing the Committee for Sustainable Agriculture, or the CSA, who will use financial incentives through both funding and rebate programs to encourage both local and large-scale farms to become industry leaders in sustainable technologies. Furthermore, the CSA also has a key role of promoting sustainable practices within both metro and rural communities, such as through community gardens and public awareness campaigns, which helps to create and facilitate a spirit of innovation and acceptance for sustainable practices, particularly in highly agricultural areas. Our team acknowledges that no amount of research on the part of policymakers will ever be able to match the experience and knowledge of farmers and workers within the agricultural industry. Therefore, instead of outlining specific sustainable measures such as hydroponics and aquaponics, which we considered in early planning stages, our bill has been purposefully designed with flexibility in mind, helping farmers to feel empowered in the adoption of sustainable measures, rather than forced and reluctant. While many measures of promoting environmentalism rely on compelling parties or handing out penalties, our bill is instead chiefly designed with farmers in mind. And the agricultural communities that our team is so closely tied to. Our bill has already received substantial support too, with the Minister for Agriculture commenting that our bill has nailed the psyche of farmers, thus highlighting how it is a notable step forward to positive conceptions of agriculture within the community. Existing legislation, such as the Victorian Environmental Protection Act of 2017, already lays out penalties and mandates for a range of industries. So rather than attempt to replicate what already exists, our bill serves as an incredibly beneficial and necessary addition by not only gearing focus towards the agricultural industry as a notable contributor to environmental degradation, but also as a means of positive reinforcement, which allows the adoption of sustainable agriculture to be conceptualized not as a burden demanded by the public, but as a way of bringing communities together. Thus, the organization we are establishing needs to represent the agricultural communities of Victoria, which is achieved through the CSA being comprised of quotas for both metropolitan and rural Victoria, as well as a means of accounting for conflicts of interest. As for how this is achieved, the CSA shall act as a funding portal, providing funding through grants to smaller farms that otherwise might not be able to afford the move to sustainable technology, helping to pay for equipment, training, and other expenses. For larger agricultural businesses, the CSA shall instead offer a rebate through lowered local government rates, which is contingent upon eligible farms enacting their proposed sustainable changes. While penalties are not the focus of this bill, it would in turn be unrealistic to operate a funding portal without the consequences being in place for those who fail to comply with CSA regulations, whether that be through the revoking of rebates and funding or the use of fines. Overall, this bill acts as an all-encompassing yet flexible framework in which innovative and substantial plans for sustainable agriculture can be realized and acted upon by agricultural businesses of any size, as well as a means by which community awareness and interaction with the subject can be encouraged. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member Killen. I call upon the Honourable Member from the opposition. Thank you, Honourable Member Cruz.
President, the Honourable Member Cruz. What the government has failed to clarify is their evidence and reasons for their bill. We are very confused by what the government means by sustainable farms. In Clause 3, they define sustainable farming without outlining the practical changes they're asking farmers to adopt. How can the opposition support a bill when we don't know what it is asking for our communities? There's a lot of confusion here. One of the many confusions is with the community garden. Will it only be for people who have money and resources to grow their own food, or would the food be going to people who need it, like homeless people and charities? One way the bill could be improved is by considering vulnerable community measures and using the resources from farms and gardens to provide aid. The community gardens could mean a lot of work for the people who need them the most. Would there be more work for the community members to have higher accountability for the garden, especially for people who are time poor, including parents, people who have young families with caring responsibilities, and inflexible work times? Community garden also might be difficult in the city, where they could be in places where there is higher risk of pollution or access could be hard for people with disabilities. The bill doesn't give enough criteria for where community gardens can be located. Also, climate change. It hasn't been very specific on how this addressed climate change. Climate change is a huge topic, and if the government did a deep enough research, they would find tons of evidence supporting animal agriculture is the biggest issue in climate change. Does this mean farms will support plant-based diets around Australia? Does this also mean the animals would be free from their constant suffering, torture, and cruelty? We also want more specific details on how this bill is going to address sustainable farming. How are we going to educate people on sustainable farming? Everyone wants change, but nobody wants to change. So how can the government expect farmers to change when what they're currently doing works for them? Many jobs and livelihoods rely on agriculture as it is structured now. People will be hesitant to adapt to new practices, meaning the bill could be ineffective. Other members of the opposition will further detail the issues we see with this bill, including suggestions about how the Community Gardens Education Campaign and Committee for Sustainable Agriculture, CSA, could be improved. Thank you.
Thank you. I call upon the honourable member from the government. Thank you.
Thank you, President. The Honourable Member Fenton. I'd like to reiterate the sentiments which the Honourable Member Killen shared with us this morning. This bill is all-encompassing and is so important to the future of agriculture in Victoria, which unfortunately the opposition clearly doesn't understand. Through this bill, the government will provide incentives for the much-needed innovation and introduction of sustainable practices within agriculture in Victoria. As to ensure that every farm gets a chance to improve, we've split the incentives into two categories: rebates, which can be read about in Clause 5, and funding in Clause 6. Each organisation applying for the incentives will be assessed on a case-by-case basis, which will allow the CSA to ensure the best possible outcome for Victoria is achieved. Rebates will be available to larger company farms who wish to stay accountable for their environmental impact, and the CSA will reward these rebates through the local government system. Funding is about uplifting the smaller farms and community organisations, farms which otherwise might not have had the opportunity to implement these sustainable practices. I live on a farm in southwest Victoria. Over the past couple of years, I've watched my mother introduce more sustainable practices to her farm with the intention of becoming a self-sustaining and regenerative farm. It has been amazing for me to watch the positive effects which not only these practices have had on the land, but also the people around it. We're at a crucial moment during this climate crisis, and this bill provides the frameworks which will allow farmers to feel safe and supported when introducing these techniques through providing financial support and education. But this bill is about so much more than just money for farmers. This bill is certain to create a ripple effect throughout Victoria. Just looking over the neighbour's fence will inspire other farmers to consider and potentially implement these practices too. It's about empowering regional communities to take action at a crucial time during this climate crisis. It's about the current and future health of our beautiful planet, and it's about creating a safe environment for future generations. This bill is essential. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member Fenton. I call upon the Honourable Member Halliday Christoph.
Christophing, yeah, thank you. Your President, Honourable Member Halliday Christophing, why I wholeheartedly support this bill, but a generous bill like this needs to be taken care of seriously. For example, you can use some more examples of sustainable farming practices and what it look like. Because not only is two, so I would be like this more, and penalties at the end should be for bad farming practices. This bill encourages sustainable practices, but who say people will change their way? CSA employment, will they have employment targets for Indigenous people? Would they also employ traditional customs from the local area to ensure that their practice is adhering to cultural heritage regulations? Will they use traditional sustainable farm practices? And at penalties, 20. One of them is 181.74 cents on government website. Fees and penalties. So if we time that 120, it's 3,643 per person, and 80,774 for a body company. Farms that earn lots of money would be affected much, but if you use that on small farms, how they going to get out of that? So maybe you percent based on how bad or how long they're practicing instead. And maybe have more stable farming had before this bill passed, like this time with deforestation, promote soil generation or waste. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member Halliday Christophe. I call upon, is there another speaker from the government? Yes, Honourable Member Walsh.
Thank you, President. Honourable Member Walsh. This bill will help to reduce the amount of waste in the agriculture industry through funding small farms to make upgrades to their methods and giving rebates to large farms for upgrading their methods. The ways that they could do this would be to have small crops in between their major crop growing times. They could also do this by implementing things like hydroponic systems that would decrease growth times and also use less fertilizer for their crops, while also allowing them to grow livestock like fish and algae alongside them. The opposition may believe that the government may not recuperate the cost of implementing the rebates and funding, but through the extra goods that are produced and the extra services that are gained from the training in community gardens, we were able to get more funding through the tax of goods and services from selling the products of which these farmers will have grown. Especially with things like hydroponics, the industry will be able to take advantage of markets in Asia which rely on fish like carp, which are very easy to grow and resilient to natural disasters, as they are seen as a delicacy in certain parts of Asia. Other countries have taken advantage of this gap in the market, like America. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member Walsh. I call upon the Honourable Member Dennis.
President, the Honourable Member Dennis. The education portion of this bill does not clarify how education programs will be made accessible to the different needs of participants. The clauses do not detail the learning needs of farmers and business owners attending the education programs. These participants require programs that are tailored to their learning needs to ensure that people are supported in their learning journey, to make sure that their practices moving forward are sustainable, and to make sure they are confident in their future farming practices. These sustainable practices may involve changing the way people have farmed their entire life. If the education is not accessible, it may become a deterrent for participating in practices and changing to become more sustainable. How will the government ensure these education programs have a sustainable rollout? How will they be revised and updated into the future as farming practices change? Farmers and people from rural communities are at high risk of mental health issues. Their jobs don't always have a stable income and can be incredibly stressful. This bill asks them to change their practices and get education that might put more pressure on an already vulnerable group. If people do live in farming communities, the issues for them are things like drought, bushfires, and storms. For these people, their crops, water, and land are important, and it is a big ask to get them to change the way they manage themselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member Dennis. Do I have, thank you, Honourable Member Chesler.
President, the Honourable Member Chesler. I want to talk about education and public awareness, which are essential parts of this bill. After all, how can we promote sustainable agriculture through rebates and funding if no one knows what it is? Notice that the bill talks about education, awareness, and campaigns, not marketing, or advertising. We recognise that the best approach to implementation is to make our campaigns collaborative and accessible. The Committee for Sustainable Agriculture doesn't order people around. It works with Victorians to develop knowledge of sustainable farming practices, as well as available government supports. This is achieved through workshops and information days open to all members of the community. Furthermore, the bill emphasises education programs aimed at the next generation of growers and land carers. This approach ensures young people are conscious of the impacts of agriculture on our natural environment, the advantages of sustainable practices, land wastage reduction, and how to farm and garden in a sustainable manner. The CSA will also integrate use of media platforms to promote these opportunities, as well as wider education campaigns. This includes social media, radio, television, and newspapers, including local outlets. Overall, this bill approaches its target audience with respect and transparency. The CSA works with communities to inform them of sustainable farming and the opportunities it brings. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member Chesler. I call upon the Honourable Member Powell.
President, the Honourable Member Paul speaking. I would like to discuss Clause 7 and the establishment of community gardens. In the introduction of this bill, it clearly states, and I quote, "This entity has the intent of reducing the environmental harm caused by Victorian agricultural businesses." Unfortunately, this bill does not detail how community gardens will actually be managed. If these gardens are managed poorly, they could actually cause more harm than good and increase the amount of environmental issues that we have by wasting water or using excessive electricity. Why would the government want to continue on their poor track record of keeping things sustainable? This bill should focus a lot more on education of what community gardens actually are, as many Victorians don't engage with these because they don't know anything about them. Education and community awareness is key in implementing such a bill. How does the government move to address the lack of awareness about community gardens? On top of this, there is no formal inspection process to set up for the community gardens, in which could result in the misuse of Crown land. It also means that the Committee for Sustainable Agriculture has to know a way to keep organisations in check and accountable to their promises. How will this be done? In this bill, there seems to be more questions left unanswered than not. I propose this bill be withdrawn and the inconsistencies be revisited. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member Paul. That was a opposition speaker. Do I have a speaker from the government? Thank you, the Honourable Member Fitzsimmons.
Thank you, President. The Honourable Member Fitzsimmons. This bill utilises natural capital accounting as a means to measure the allocation of funds. Natural capital is the world's stock of natural resources, features of our environment that both directly or indirectly produce value to people, including ecosystems, species, fresh water, land, minerals, the air and oceans, as well as natural processes and functions are all elements of natural capital. The measurement, restoration and building of natural capital is essential to recognising and building the strengths of Australian landscapes in financial, environmental, community, cultural and spiritual terms. Another key aspect of this bill is funding for community gardens. There are many benefits of community gardens and gardening in a broader sense. Some benefits include the increase in biodiversity of flora and fauna, improved air quality, boosting mental health and fighting food insecurity. The implementation of this bill will provide funding for not-for-profit and community organisations and charities to build community gardens. Community gardens are more than just a place to grow of food. They foster belonging and connection, promote healthy eating, and create greener communities. There is even correlation between community gardens and a decrease in crime rates. Community gardens can be situated in almost any outdoor space, including parks, vacant land, rooftops, and nature strips, allowing accessibility and versatility. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member Fitzsimmons. I really love community gardens too, so it was great to hear that. Do I have a member from the opposition? The Honourable Member Beard?
President, the Honourable Member Beard. In Clause 8, it is discussed that the Committee for Sustainable Agriculture will create and run public awareness campaigns through various methods. The opposition would like to draw your attention to the lack of clarity and detail in these programs' descriptions. Will agricultural public awareness be made accessible to people who need various interpreters, people with different learning abilities, and be available during business hours or school hours or after hours? Additionally, there is a further lack of clarity in Clause 5. The government talks about providing large farms with rebates, but fails to detail exactly how small or large these rebates will be. This oversight undermines the effectiveness of the bill and leaves it at risk of providing rebates so small they will not provide the required incentive to shift to sustainable practices, or so large that they cause unnecessary economic strain. The move to sustainable agricultural practices will require a massive culture shift across Victoria. By failing to provide adequate solutions to the hesitancy of the agricultural sector to change when current practices are both socially ingrained and profitable, this bill is at risk of being ultimately ineffective, especially given that the education programs and financial incentives are not given adequate outline to ensure that they are effective.
Thank you, Honourable Member Beard. Can I call upon the Honourable Member Gray?
Thank you, President. The Honourable Member Gray speaking. The CSA plays a crucial role in the successful implementation and both short and long-term management of this bill, as well as the utilisation of sustainable practices in the agricultural sector. Establishing an overarching and administrative body such as the Committee for Sustainable Agriculture enables inclusion of a diverse assembly of stakeholders in the CSA to provide a variety of skills and prior knowledge to the body, which provides greater comprehension in the areas of education and public awareness campaigns, finances, and also enables representatives from both regional and rural areas as well as metropolitan communities. Creating a body is the best option to enable a more collaborative and flexible approach for the vast variety of people that this bill is directed towards or has an effect on. Education and public awareness campaigns are vital for community engagement and information to be widespread and accessible for all members of the public, as the Honourable Member Chesler discussed. This is yet another focus area of the CSA that enables to be fostered, alongside finance officers in order to allow further insight and expertise in the areas of expenditure, application reviews, case-by-case funding analysis, and deciding upon rebates. It is of the utmost importance that the CSA does not tell farmers and other members of the agricultural community what to do or how to do it, as that is not the intention of this bill. We wish to provide incentives and rebates, as mentioned by the Honourable Member Fenton, in order to allow choice and flexibility in decisions that will provide positive outcomes for our environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Do I have a speaker from the opposition? I call upon the Honourable Member Din.
President, the Honourable Member Din speaking. Clause 4.3 explains that beneficiaries of this operation are not those that are the CSA. This includes both private and commercial farmers. While an understandable measure to prevent corruption, this means that the voices of people working in the agricultural sector are not being represented in the process of decision-making, especially when they affect them. How can the government expect efficient participation in the plans and actions that they propose when the people themselves are impacted are not invited to contribute their knowledge and lived experience, as well as unique perspectives on current and future farming practices? By excluding people from the agriculture sector from the Committee for Sustainable Agriculture, this bill is also putting decisions of the committee at risk of being at best ill-informed and at worst damaging to the environment. We should be looking after our own. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member Din. Do I have a speaker from the government? Thank you, Honourable Member Mitchell.
President, the Honourable Member Mitchell speaking. The opposition argued that the sustainable practices associated with this bill would be a lot of work. But why are we looking at this as an issue? Having more jobs leads to a more stimulated economy and improves the well-being of farmers, agriculture specialists, and even just your average green thumb like myself. Providing more jobs and hobbies targeted towards green thumbs allows people to feel a greater sense of purpose within our society, boosting their self-esteem and overall confidence. This bill is fantastic as anyone can participate in the agricultural practices, community gardens being run by citizens of the neighbourhood. Why would we not want to have a healthier, happier population? This bill could also increase profits for the agricultural industry and hence make this industry stronger in the wake of natural disasters, which, as yesterday has proven all of us, can happen at any time, anywhere. I would also like to highlight a point raised by the opposition earlier in our debate. The reasoning behind that own or hold investments in farms or own stakes in agricultural business are not a part of CSA is rather simple, as it creates a conflict of interest. Therefore, ensuring the individuals within a body do not profit off the CSA in a monetary sense prevents bias from becoming an issue during decision making. However, it is highly encouraged that the CSA use other bodies as a means of advice, such as the Victorian Farmers Federation or the Young Farmers Advisory Council, as these are bodies that are trusted by the government when making decisions effective agriculturally. Thank you.
A very contemporary argument, Honourable Member Mitchell. Love it. Do I have a speaker from the opposition? We will have the floor open for another maybe 5 to 10 minutes. Thank you, the Honourable Member Thomas.
President, the Honourable Member Thomas. I would just like to address the issue of using the acronym CSA. Although it is in this bill written as Committee for Sustainable Agriculture, there is a much larger body called the Crime Statistics Agency, which runs all of Australia's crime statistics. And this is a problem because what if people get confused about which body it is? Thank you.
Great point there, Member Thomas. Do I have a speaker from the government? Even for a short rebuttal, if you will. Thank you, the Honourable Member Boyd.
President, the Honourable Member Boyd. The opposition has repeatedly raised concerns about the severity of the penalties set out by this bill. The government wishes to clear up any confusion. The penalties outlined, which would only be imposed should funding be misused, are extremely proportional to the offence. A natural person would receive a sanction of 20 penalty units, and a body corporation would receive a sanction of 100 penalty units. For reference, this is only slightly more than breaches of the Liquor Control Act.
Thank you for the clarification, Member Boyd. Do I have any speakers from the opposition? Thank you, Honourable Member Scott.
President, the Honourable Member Scott, I find it highly hypocritical and problematic that the government can speak on altering the way agriculture works, particularly in relation to the environment, without looking at how Indigenous people have farmed the land over the years. We need to look at burning practices and traditional farming management before we can look at implementing new methods. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member Scott. Do we have a speaker from the government? Reminding speakers that you only have 2 bills left after this. So if you want to have your voice heard on this one, it's time to jump in. Thank you, Honourable Member McRae.
President, Honourable Member McRae, I'd just like to point out that within the bill, the government has decided to make sure that there is flexibility so individuals can choose the best methods for them, and that means we can incorporate practices from First Nations people and make sure the land is treated properly and respectfully to show the importance of First Nations people and looking after the land.
Thank you, Honourable Member McRae. Do I have a speaker from the opposition? If I have no speakers, I'll call upon Honourable Member Killen for the right of reply.
President, the Honourable Member Killen. If I can assert one final point, it is that while the opposition has put forward a number of arguments against this proposal, whether it be through infrastructure-based constraints of community gardens or the issue of climate change, they have fundamentally misunderstood the nature of this bill, particularly in relation to existing environmental legislation. Rather than trying to solve a huge issue such as climate change, our bill is primarily targeted to the agricultural sector, a community and an industry that is vastly under-considered within policy in relation to the environmental impacts that it has. And also exhibits many reservations about being forced into environmental sustainability at the cost of livelihoods, profits, and equipment. Legislation never exists in isolation. It builds upon that which already exists in meaningful ways, and that is exactly what our bill does. Therefore, I implore all members present to view this bill not through the myopic lens of implementation and infrastructure, but as the reflection of lived experiences in a rural context. As an entrepreneurial, community-focused, and above all, empathetic solution to an industry that is otherwise skeptical of mandates and penalty-focused means of promoting sustainability, I would challenge every member present to simply consider whether they would prefer to believe in a worldview where farmers are greedy, self-interested, and needing to be forced around with penalties and mandates, or in one where farmers and communities are capable of working together and innovating towards sustainability in an optimistic vision that this bill presents. I implore you all to pass this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member Killen, and to all the honourable members who provided a speech on the matter today. So we now come to the third reading of the bill. So yes, we do. Sorry. So the question is that the Sustainability Agriculture Incentives Bill now be read a second and third time. All of those of that opinion say aye, or to the contrary, no. Okay, I'm going to say that the ayes do have it. Congratulations to the Moyne Shire team on the passage of the Sustainability Agriculture Incentives Bill.
Thank you very much, youth parliamentarians, and thank you very much Beck Brooker for coming in and chairing this debate. Could I get all of our youth parliamentarians to give a big love heart react for Beck's amazing work during this debate? And to those of you tuning in at home, thank you once again for joining. We still have 2 more debates in the council for the rest of the day, and we also have a live stream for the assembly, and we look forward to seeing you for the rest of the day. Thank you for stopping by.